What is up, my fellow video game enthusiasts? About a year ago, Hi-Fi Rush became another victim of my harder-than-average skull, and I'm here to tell you that it was one of the most amazing games that I've ever played. Rhythm and action. Two genres of games that blend perfectly when given to the right hands. Tango Gameworks was a fantastic game development studio that had just the right balance of creative vision and talent. With their skill, they crafted what is essentially a cross between Devil May Cry and a metronome. Everything in the game is synced up to the beat, and when I say everything, I mean everything. We're talking attacks, we're talking cutscenes, hell, even environmental details such as potted plants will throb to the beat of some nostalgic tunes like Invaders Must Die by The Prodigy. I can't stress enough how awe-inspiring it was to experience a hack and slash that is fully integrated with its music, but I'm sure as hell going to try. Shy Hi-Fi Rush. This guy is a dork. Something unspecified has got his right arm in a bind. But he kinda needs that thing because his dream is to become a rock star. So when given the opportunity, he signs up for a new project orchestrated by Vandelay Technologies that'll rip off his old, fleshy, wet noodle and replace it with a cold, unfeeling metallic one, which has one less finger than that of a normal human hand for some reason. But no matter, that's not the important part. The real kicker is that due to a Whoopi Goldberg machine level of events, this guy gets a massively mini media player shoved into his chest where his heart should be. While this may have some negative consequences down the line, it comes with a pretty sweet plus side. Everything that Chai perceives will now follow along to the beat of his favorite Spotify playlist, making for an unforgettable adventure involving the destruction of an entire robotics company's workforce. So whether you like it or not, all actions will be done on beat, regardless of your ability to actually keep rhythm. And this includes jumping and dodging. There are times where this does interfere with basic platforming a little bit, but most of the time you're too busy bashing away at sentient machines to notice. Each level is set up with small arena-shaped battlefields that are connected by platforming segments of varying length. The battlefields tend to be either rectangular or circular flat surfaces, and while that doesn't detract from the gameplay, when looking back on the whole experience, there are only 3 rooms that I recall having environmental hazards, and I just think that it would have been pretty interesting to see more things that could both help and harm the player during combat in a game that has to adhere to a beat pattern. The platforming segments are mostly exactly what you'd expect from a game like this, with some hidden pathways and doors that are meant to be revisited in the post-game. A number of collectibles are scattered around each level, and a good amount of them are easy to discover without too much effort. The bosses felt highly unique, and I fell in love with pretty much all of them, only having 2 particular gripes by the end of the game. 1. There are only 6 full-fledged boss fights, and 2. Every boss's health bar is segmented into 3 or 4 parts, and getting a game over places you back at the beginning of the current segment, when I kind of would have preferred it to restart the whole fight from square one. Aesthetically, the game hits every mark needed and then some. The environments are vibrant and colorful without being so chaotic that it becomes impossible to tell what's going on. On top of that, the consistent motion of everything around you is a highly intuitive way to seamlessly merge a form of visual indicator with the beat of the current song. This, working in tandem with the perfectly fitting sound design, melds into what I can only describe as pure, harmonic satisfaction. Now I feel like this goes without saying, but I'm gonna say it anyway. All things involving sound are pleasing one way or another. There are next to no sound effects or tracks that I straight up disliked hearing. However, I did question the sound that plays for parrying, strictly because I found it strange to hear a guitar, when I thought something like a metal clashing sound would have made more sense, especially given the fact that Chai's weapon is just a magnetic metal pole that's picked up whatever garbage just so happens to be around him at the time. The music is where they really hit home. The soundtrack is split into 2 parts, licensed and unlicensed, with a small bit of overlap between the two. Both successfully set the mood, although I noticed there are some subtle jokes to be had with the licensed tracks, usually involving their names. Alright, now that we're done talking about the cool stuff, let's start talking about the wall. At the northwestern side of the hideout, there is, well, a wall. But this is a special wall. This one lets you paint pretty pictures on it. So, aside from the actual achievement list, you'll find that there's also a set of in-game challenges. Every time one is completed, a new image will be added to the mural, and you'll be granted small rewards like extra currency or collectibles for upgrades. The challenges range from things as simple as defeating a few enemies to as complicated as completing boss fights without taking damage. I found some of the more notable ones to be the Rhythm Tower, Spectra Doors, and playing the game 5 times. That's right, 5 whole times. So you know how it would be logical for games that have achievements related to difficulty to give you everything under the difficulty you completed the game on? Well, for some reason, Hi-Fi Rush doesn't do that. And the best part is that there's another 5 additional challenges for S-ranking all stages on each difficulty. I don't know what possessed the devs to make the player bend over backwards like this, but thankfully this is the most annoying part of the journey, so it only goes up from here. As for the Rhythm Tower and Spectra doors, here's where the fun begins. We all know that no action game is complete without both a combat gauntlet and series of special missions. Hi-Fi Rush is no exception. The Rhythm Tower is this game's combat gauntlet. For the most part, it's pretty standard with basic enemies on most floors and bosses on each multiple of 10. But there's a minor twist. There are actually some extra enemies that don't show up over the course of the main game and appear only in the post-game just to keep you on your toes. The Spectra doors I didn't enjoy very much, but it was less because of the nature of their requirements and more so because of their quantity. Every level has 1 door, making for an initial count of 8. After completing those, you'll unlock a hub room with another 8 challenges for a total of 16. By the time I got to maybe the 5th or 6th door, the novelty of the missions sort of wore off, and I felt more like I was completing them out of obligation or to kill time. Mind you, I still mostly had fun with it, I just had more fun with almost everything else. So, was 100%ing Hi-Fi Rush worth it? 110% yes. Obtaining every achievement took me roughly 89 hours, and just about every step of the way I was enjoying myself. The base game and the post-game are the bee's knees, but the free update that was added about half a year later is where you can really see the blood, sweat, and tears that were poured into the creation of this game. I'm not sure if this is something that Tango Gameworks planned to include in the initial release and couldn't due to time constraints, or if enough people bought the game and made enough of a ruckus on various forums leading to the devs expanding a bit more on this project before starting a new one. But either way, the end result is the addition of 2 new game modes, Power Up Tower Up and BPM Rush. Power Up Tower Up I assume was an attempt to give the game more replayability, because it essentially functions as a roguelike, while BPM Rush is where they decided to crank everything up to 11 by making the maximum beats per minute 200 against even more new enemies. Both of these added their own respective challenges and rewards, but by this point I had already unlocked the golden guitar, so ultimately the main thing that I was looking for was the high-octane gameplay provided by a low margin for error and playing the game at almost double its normal speed. Upon completing all of the challenges added alongside these game modes, you'll unlock the crime scene. But in all seriousness, this room had me on the verge of tears. In here, you'll find at least one message from each department of the dev team, voicing how difficult making a game like this was, but also how much everyone enjoyed putting it all together, and the pride they felt once it was finally complete, paired with a genuine thank you to the player for taking the time to appreciate everything that Hi-Fi Rush had to offer. Seeing all of this, and then hearing about a year later that Tango Gameworks was getting tossed out like Woody after the release of Buzz Lightyear, I felt my heart sink. Luckily, this feeling was fleeting, because 4 months later, Krafton, a South Korean publisher, acquired a little less than half of Tango Gameworks' original team, as well as the rights for Hi-Fi Rush, leaving a ray of hope for those of us that loved the first game and wanted to see how they could expand upon it with a sequel. Thank you for watching, and remember,